yoga needs to be personalized. And just another reason why working with a therapist as opposed to going to a group yoga class where 20 people or 50 people are all doing the exact same thing, that's not appropriate. So what's appropriate for me today may not be appropriate for me in 2 years or 2 years ago.
I am Gloria Grace Rand, founder of The Love Method and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself. In this podcast, we share practical advice from a spiritual perspective on how to live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically, so you can create a life and business with more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Live, Love, Engage. Namaste. Would you like to know how to live happier and healthier in just 10 minutes a day? Well, if so, today's episode is for you because I've got just the guest coming up here shortly to teach you how to do that. But first, I do want to welcome you to Live, Love, Engage, especially if this is your first time tuning in. I am Gloria Grace, founder of Align to Shine Academy, and I work with spiritually minded women entrepreneurs to help them to break free from self-doubt and step into their highest potential. And that our guest today, I think, is someone who is pretty much in alignment with that as well. So she is Deborah Charnes, and she's one of the first American bilingual certified yoga therapists. And she found her calling after spending 2 decades managing hundreds of news conferences and press briefings in the corporate world. And she's also the author of the book From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram: Wisdom for Mind, Body, and Spirit. And we're going to be talking about all of this stuff because I got a couple of questions to ask her regarding that and a couple things. So without further ado, I am going to bring her on right now and welcome you, Deborah, officially to Live, Love, Engage.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's so important when one of the things that you mentioned is self-doubt, and that can kind of hold all of us back.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely has held me back in the past, and I was fortunate enough to find some tools and strategies that I use now and that I also teach my clients as well. But I'm sure that everyone who tuned into this episode is like, what do you mean? How can I be happy and healthy in just 10 minutes a day? So I wonder if we could start there. We'll kind of go into some other things that I want to ask you about, but I figure let's just get right to the meat of this. So,
sure. Well, when I wrote my book, it's 12 chapters, and each chapter has a different tip. And so each tip you can do in 10 minutes a day or less. Now, if you're going to do all 12 of them together, then 12 times 10, it's a little bit longer. But the way that I wrote my book is I wanted to offer it so that you do what's right for you today. And then maybe in 2 months, you need to do something else. Maybe next year, something else. So you can layer on whatever is right for you. Because I certainly felt, because I worked 80-hour weeks for most of my life and, was raising, a family, had a family to take care of, and I was traveling all over the world for work. So we don't have, not only do most of us not have much time, but oftentimes we don't have the mindset or the energy to be able to do what we need to do. And in fact, I lead workshops called First Love Yourself. And my First Love Yourself workshops are very much about self-care and prioritizing yourself. And so that's why I wanted to give my advice in little snippets that you can do. Again, maybe today you focus on your back health. For example, if you have a bad back, maybe you do something for your back health. My entire life have had back issues. I don't have any problems. And I feel that my back is great, but I have to do things all the time to prevent backaches. The same thing, I was diagnosed with digestive disorders when I was a kid. I don't have any problems, but there are certain things that I do in 10 minutes a day or less to prevent any issues. And those are physical, but what is emotional or spiritual sometimes can be harder to pinpoint. My background is very much founded in Ayurveda, which is the life science from India. And even my teachers in Ayurveda, they acknowledge that a lot of people would rather pop pills or take a shot of something rather than make lifestyle changes. And so that's why I felt it was important to offer lifestyle changes that are not only easy to do in 10 minutes a day or less, but fun. So for example, some of the things that I recommend for almost everyone are laugh every single day, dance every single day, sing every single day, smile every single day. That you can easily do all of those in 10 minutes a day or less. Mix them all together. And it really helps your mind, your body, and your spirit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I know that there are studies that have, shown this. So it's not just you just saying that you believe it works. It's if you go do the research, truly there is research on this, and it's so good for you, and it makes you feel good, which also helps. And I love that you share that. Those are all of my favorite things to do, because I was a dancer growing up. I loved, I did ballet and tap and jazz, but I still just like to, sometimes dance around the living room, as they say. So I love that. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, though, because you touched on this a little bit. So I'm curious, what actually, was there a certain point, what prompted you to be able to start making that shift from, working in the corporate world, and how did you maybe find the tools that worked for you that then you were able to share?
I think sometimes we all need a little bit of a kick in the butt. I have met many people who made lifestyle changes because they lost their jobs. I did not lose my job, but I saw so many people who lost their jobs, and as a result of that, they kind of grew into themselves. And I always felt, I had to keep my job because I needed the steady paycheck. I needed all of the benefits that I enjoyed in terms of healthcare primarily. But finally, I kind of was at a stage in my life where I was older. My daughter was she was in grad school, and she was working, and she had her own healthcare from her job. So that made me feel, I can take care of myself. I don't need very much for myself. And that's something that I talk about in my book also. One of the chapters is about money doesn't buy you happiness. And, I don't need very much. But of course, when you're talking about your children, you want to give them everything you can. So I finally felt that I was at a stage in my life where I could kind of buckle up and take the leap. And I did. And of course, my only regret is that I didn't do it much earlier in life. And again, I think it goes back to self-doubt. We sometimes question, how we can make changes. And it's always much more comfortable to do the same thing rather than take a leap of faith and take a jump and do something different.
Yeah, that is definitely so true, because it requires commitment, and it can be scary sometimes too, I think, to be able to make that change. And I encourage you out there that if you want to be able to grow, you do have to do that. And I actually, I even still have this written down somewhere. I was on a New Year's program the other day, and a New Year's Eve program, and one of the guests, her name was Robin Jordan. She had a new acronym for fear, which I love, and it stands for feeling excited and ready.
Beautiful.
And I love that because I thought, because yes, you can be fearful, but when you can reframe that into being, okay, let me see if I can just get excited about doing this and make that change, and it can so benefit your life. I want to ask you, I was intrigued. One of the things that caught my eye is when you say that you are a certified yoga therapist. Now, I've heard of yoga teachers before, but I've never heard of a yoga therapist. So what is the difference?
That's common. Most people are not familiar with the term yoga therapist. And the International Association of Yoga Therapy just created a credentialing process. And I was in the first wave, which is why I say that I was one of the first bilingual certified yoga therapists in the United States, because I was in the first wave, and I believe it was 2013 when they finally had all of the criteria that was required. And my studies were all done in sync with the International Association of Yoga Therapists' creation of their criteria. So my studies were 100% in a line with what the requirements were going to be. But bottom line, what I tell people is a yoga teacher, a certified yoga teacher, there are different levels, but the first level is 200 hours. So you need 200 hours of training. And then there's another level, which is 500 hours of training. But a yoga therapist is approximately 1,000 hours of training. And it is much different because I liken it to a cross between a physical therapist, a psychotherapist, and a movement therapist, and a holistic coach. I also say all the time, I say I'm a holistic coach, because when I meet a new client for yoga therapy, my intakes are approximately 2 hours long. I look at their medical history. I look at their habits. What do they do? Do they play golf? Do they play tennis? Do they carry babies on one side? All those things that can alter their bodies. I ask a lot about their emotional well-being and their stresses, and then I do a musculoskeletal evaluation. I do all sorts of things. So again, it's about a 2-hour intake. I also ask to look at all of their medical records and what kind of meds they may be taking and why. And then I put them on a plan. And my plan typically is about a 12-week plan, and it can be very lengthy. So we do it little by little. And it's not about the body. There may be some things that are about the body, but it's lifestyle management. And so as an example, the chapter in my book, so one of the chapters in my book is all about digestive well-being, and it's from an Ayurvedic standpoint. And so from an Ayurvedic standpoint, yes, it does matter what you eat, but it's also what time do you eat? What foods do you combine or not combine? What kind of body work do you do to relax yourself? What kind of breath work do you do to relax yourself? What stressors are in your environment that maybe you need to change? So for example, with me, maybe one of those things that I needed to change was to get rid of my 80-hour-a-week job where I was constantly on airplanes, flying all over and not eating, because I would be on a 7 a.m. plane. I'd arrive home at midnight and I would never eat. The only food I could get was pretty much popcorn in the airport because I have a special diet. I try not to even eat popcorn, but so there most of us need to adjust our lifestyles. to have maximum well-being. And that's why also in my book, I say, pick and choose what you want to start with in terms of what's right for you now.
Yeah.
So maybe what's right for you today is to sing every day, which releases, so many of the feel-good hormones. And you were talking before about the research. And I'm the kind of person where, if you tell me something, I want to know. I want to see it written. I want to see the written proof. And so as a result, every one of my chapters has clinical research studies to back up what my teachers are saying, and then my personal experiences with everything.
I love that. Yeah, I'm with you. I also love to be able to justify things because it's just not enough to say it works. I want to see the proof. I want to see that there's some kind of studies or something backing it up. So I love that, and I love what you were talking about there. And now, of course, I've like totally lost what I was going to ask about next, but that's okay. It's all good. So I'm gonna it'll come back to me later. But one thing I did want to also ask you about was the title of your book, because I was intrigued by how does the boxing ring play into this? So is there a story behind that you could share?
There are multiple stories. So, which is kind of what makes it neat. And first of all, what I want to mention as a writer, it is so common that you spend so much time and energy figuring out what's going to be the best title for your book. And then in the end, you change it at the last minute. And that was the case for my book. I had a working title, which, I got a lot of people's feedback on, and I spent so much time tweaking the working title. And then when my book was ready to be published, I had a long call with my publisher and the art director, because we were going to create the idea for the cover art. And in creating the cover art, we also brainstormed a little bit and fine-tuned the title. And the reason why I liked the title, From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram, was because to me, a boxing ring and an ashram are so contradictory. A boxing ring to me is where there's a lot of blood and a lot of beating people up, and the goal is to hurt someone and to knock them out. And an ashram is a center for spiritual study and for enlightenment, and it's all about peacefulness and about self-improvement and about being kind to yourself and to everyone else and to the planet. So that was one of the reasons why I liked the concept of From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram. And we've got boxing gloves inside. You can't really tell, but it's inside. The pink is a lotus flower. And so those gloves are inside the lotus flower. And one of the reasons why we talk about boxing ring is because in my marketing communications days, I did promote boxing matches, not boxing rings, but boxing matches. So I worked with a lot of boxers. But the main reason is the final chapter in the book is about one of my teachers who is the most peaceful, positive woman that I know. And she was a professional boxer. She was a world-class boxer, a little old for her age to be classified as she was, and she got hit too many times in the head, ended up with dementia pugilistica, which basically is permanent brain damage, TBIs, cognitive disrepair. And then she also was a victim of different crimes and assaults. So she had PTSD. And then, of course, with all of that combined, she had chronic pain and she had severe depression. She was suicidal. but she overcame everything. And that's why it's the final chapter, because I find her story is so uplifting, and she is such an uplifting person and such a peaceful person. And to me, it's hard to imagine that at one time, you know, she was all about punching someone out.
Yeah. And that I love that juxtaposition of that. So that totally makes sense now. And it is interesting to think about how she could have gone from that, but of course, yeah, you know, being in so much pain and whatnot, which actually brings me to, now I remembered the question that I was going to ask you is why would someone come to you, let's say, versus, you know, maybe, you know, or yeah, just actually, I'm just going to stick with that. Why would someone come to you? What's sort of their main issue that they want to be able to get some relief from?
Well, I'll tell you who should come to me as opposed to why. And
Okay.
I actually have I have a YouTube channel, which is my name, and I've created lots of YouTube videos in both English and in Spanish. And several of them are about what is yoga therapy, who would benefit from yoga therapy, and the difference between yoga therapy and yoga, and how do you know if yoga therapy is right for you. And of course, I would say everybody would benefit from it. But if you think about it, it's almost like, you know, we all have, face it, we all have some kind of physical, emotional, or spiritual issues. And that's why I like to say it's also as if I'm a life coach or a holistic coach, because it's not just about the body. But I have had clients that are 10-year-olds, and I have had clients that are in their 80s. I have had people that have anxiety. I've had people that have combat fatigue and severe chronic pain. I have had, you know, people with a wide range of issues. And basically, the other thing that I didn't mention is one of the things that we have to do as yoga therapists in our training, aside from, I mean, it's so much more than yoga instruction, but we have to create case studies. So we're basically doing our own research with people. And so we have to be able to, everything we have to do has to, you know, have, you know, it has to have, you have to be able to substantiate what you're doing and why. And many yoga therapists have specialty practice areas. And when I have a new client, oftentimes I don't know what their needs are. And sometimes I might be a little bit worried, well, what if they have, let's just say, Parkinson's? And there are many people that specialize in yoga therapy for Parkinson's. There are many people that specialize in yoga therapy for heart disease. Others might focus more on emotional issues. Some of the things that I specialize in, but of course I work with everyone, but some of the things that I specialize in are digestive disorders, bone issues, whether it could be osteoporosis, it could be osteopenia, it could be rheumatoid arthritis, it could be sciatica. I mean, you know, a wide range of things, and also blood sugar management. So those are some things that I focus on. And again, I'm not telling people, oh, you're going to manage your diabetes by doing a yoga pose. No, it's lifestyle management. And some of the reasons why I choose those specialty areas is because I have personal experience with them. So they're the things that I have studied very much because they affect me personally. And so as an example, I'm 66 years old. My mother passed away from diabetes. All her siblings and her mother had insulin resistance. I was diagnosed with my insulin resistance probably about 20 years ago. I take 0 meds and my blood sugar levels are fine, but I do a lot to to be healthy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's all the things that I think that you've already talked about. I'm sure it's watching what you eat, and spending time doing like mindfulness practices, because all of that really makes a difference. And yeah, I can relate, because my mother had, yeah, she was, I think, diagnosed diabetic, but she had a high blood pressure, she had heart problems, and she used to take, a ton of different medications. She was one of those people that you talked about at the beginning, where they wanted, just have a pill to be able to fix things, instead of really getting to the root cause of her issue, which was that she wasn't living a healthy lifestyle. And so I've strived to, not always there, but overall, I've so far, so good. No high blood pressure, no diabetes. I don't take medication either, and it's makes a huge difference.
And I'm glad you mentioned the root cause. So again, I mentioned my background is Ayurveda, so everything I do is informed through Ayurveda. And I also have studied a lot of traditional Chinese medicine. I am not an Ayurvedic doctor, and I'm not a traditional Chinese medical doctor. But again, I have studied them a lot. And both of them are about finding the root cause. And from an Eastern perspective, oftentimes those root causes are imbalances. And the imbalances are not how we view them from a Western standpoint, but it can be imbalance. And I talk about it all in my book. For example, with digestive disorders, is you need digestive fire from an Ayurvedic perspective. And traditional Chinese medicine also talks about fire versus water versus metal versus earth, all the different elements. And if those elements are off, there is imbalance. Likewise, in yoga, we talk about the meridians. Those in traditional Chinese medicine are the energetic channels where the qi flows. In yoga, we talk about it as the prana. So it's the life energy that flows through your energetic channels. And the energetic channels, we have so many of them, but the primary ones have names associated with organs, but it's not about organs. So for example, your liver meridian or your kidney meridian. And if the energy is not flowing through those meridians, then you will have energetic, emotional, physical issues.
Yeah. It is amazing how everything is tied together, and also connected is tied together. Yes. Whatever. Oh goodness. This has been such an education for me, and it's going by so fast, but I still want to ask you a couple more things. What is a commonly held belief about, let's say, about yoga, perhaps, that you passionately disagree with?
Yeah, I don't like the commercialization of yoga in the Western world. And in our society in the West, it's so common that the most popular forms of yoga are the very energetic kinds of yoga where you're sweating and hot. We have hot yoga now too. And it's strayed so much from what the authentic yoga is. And I also, you can't really tell how I'm dressed today, but because I'm outside and I've got something covering me, but I'm just wearing like a sweater dress over leggings. And I had a class at 6:00 this morning. And to me, I don't wear official yoga attire. I wear whatever I'm comfortable in. And from my background, from a yogic world, you're supposed to be modest in your dress. You're supposed to cover your arms and your legs. Now, granted, if you're living in Texas like I am, and if you are doing hot yoga, you're going to want to be more comfortable. But I also don't believe in all of the props that are routine. I believe that you need to use your body. Original yoga, there were no props. There were no yoga mats. I do yoga anywhere. I don't need a mat. Now, in yoga therapy, I often will work with props from a therapeutical standpoint. But in traditional yoga, again, my foundations in yoga, there are no props. And again, you don't, in India, it's very common, there are no yoga mats. But the other thing that is something that concerns me, I've done a lot of professional development beyond my yoga therapy training. And I'm also a prenatal, postpartum, yoga for fertility, and pelvic floor certified instructor. And I actually have an upcoming workshop, and it's about yoga for women. And the concept is yoga was not created by and for women, the original yoga. So what is right for a man to do is not necessarily right for a woman to do. And if a woman is pregnant, if a woman is perimenopausal, if a woman is wherever she is on her monthly cycle, all of those affect what you should be doing. So bottom line, yoga needs to be personalized. And just another reason why working with a therapist as opposed to going to a group yoga class where 20 people or 50 people are all doing the exact same thing, that's not appropriate. So what's appropriate for me today may not be appropriate for me in 2 years or 2 years ago. And so we need to acknowledge that. And again, we're not cookies, with a cookie cutter. So we shouldn't do cookie cutter forms of yoga.
Oh, thank you for addressing that. And that is fascinating to think about. I would never have thought about that, but it's true that, yeah, it wasn't, because I know I've done some research, a little bit of research in the past about yoga, and also the fact that yoga wasn't also just exercise. It also incorporated the mind, as a mindfulness practice, I think, too. Or I may not be exactly correct on that, but I know it wasn't just, yoga isn't just for necessarily practices. It's really more about more of a holistic way of life, I guess, right? Does that sound right?
So there are 3 words that are used to characterize yoga dating back to the scriptures, I don't know if it's 5,000 years ago. And it's basically stillness and comfort in your seat. So it's about stillness, and it's about being grounded. It's not about, and again, I do all forms of yoga and I love all forms of yoga, but to me, and of course my roots with yoga, the yoga that I began was meditation and breath work. Those were what I started when I was a kid because of my physical needs. And, I found that for my physical pain in the back, yes, the form of yoga helped, but for my digestive disorders, I needed breath work and I needed meditation. And that's why I still do them. Again, for life, I will have to pretty much always incorporate them, because so much of what bothers most people today are stress related. And we have so many stressors. And so again, if you consider that traditionally yoga was just about sitting, meditating, breathing, and according to, I don't know if this is true, but according to one theory that I read, and it sounds right to me, is that yoga as we know it today, with the suns, in particular the sun salutations, all came to be after the British Army was in India. So the concept of calisthenics meshed it with some of the ancient traditions of yoga.
Hmm.
So that's why I like a lot of yin and restorative yoga, or hatha, where you are more focused on grounding and stillness.
Yeah. I'm with you. So that's very interesting. I'll have to do some research on that myself, but I agree with you. It sounds very plausible as where it could come from. I'm gonna
And I was going to say one of my foundations in yoga, I have several, but my original kind of foundations in yoga is Shivananda yoga. And a few of the chapters in my book talk about Shivananda. And Swami Shivananda was an army medical doctor. And he created his form of yoga. It's a specific sequence, and you only follow that one sequence. And that sequence does include prayers, it includes breath work, it includes relaxation throughout, but it also includes the sun salutations.
Very cool. Well, is there anything else that I should have asked you, but I didn't? Any other last point you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Well, one thing I hear all the time is I hear people say, oh, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible. And again, yoga is not just about moving the body. There are so many different aspects to the yoga. And so what I actually consider is, to me, my entire book, I consider it yoga therapy in disguise. So even the singing to me is yoga. I talk about laughter yoga. But the other thing about the flexibility is that the more flexible you are, the more prone you are to injury. And if you're not flexible, then you have more stability, which means less risk for injury.
Well, that's the opposite of what I would have thought. So, so that's interesting. Okay.
But if you look at dancers, dancers always have injuries because they're hypermobile.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you do raise a good point. Very interesting. Okay. I'm not going to worry so much about flexibility per se, but definitely grounding and having that good foundation. In fact, that's interesting because another friend was just talking about that the other day, that she's focusing in on balance because she's recuperating from, I think, hip surgery or something. So, yeah.
And the way that I look at it is I think of strength, balance, and flexibility, not only for the body, but for the mind and for your well-being and just for your character.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if someone has been listening to this or watching and they want to find out where to connect with you, where's the best place to do that?
Definitely my website. And on the website, I also have all the links to all my social media and everything else, because I'm everywhere. But go to my website.
All right. And that is 𝘠𝘪𝑐harnes.com. And I will have that in the show notes as well for those of you who are listening today. So thank you so much. I'm so glad that we have connected, and you really enlightened me today and educated me, and I so appreciate it. And I think I'm going to have to go grab a copy of your book so I can find out what these different tips are. I suspect I probably do some of them, but I bet you there's a few in there that I don't. And so I loved learning from new people.
And I'll say thank you so much. And oftentimes I wear the exact color pink that you're wearing, and because your colors and your logo match mine.
Very good. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being with us. I so appreciate you. And I also want to thank all of you for listening and watching, and encourage you, hopefully, if you receive some value from this episode today, that you will subscribe on your favorite podcast platform if you're not already, or subscribe on YouTube at Gloria Grace Rand, R-A-N-D. And until next time, I encourage you to go out, as always, and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.